Strings of Malice, Book 1, Snowflake in an Alley, An Old Mother Nonsense Story. Chapter 10, Granny Not Cracklecreep. The track back to the city proper was a slow, quiet one. Lanrith kept pausing and deliberately looking down when they came to uneven ground, or when they had to climb over small things like rocks and logs. Arinka was sure they had not had such a hard time of it going up, but the man seemed to deliberately go out of his way to step over them while craning his head down to look at the movement. She supposed there must have been something going on in his head, but things like that were difficult for him to explain. Once they arrived and reconnected with their companions outside a sweet shop, Arinka was reminded their eccentric doctor was, quite literally, a voice doctor. He explained, as best he could, but it finally sank in when he unceremoniously pointed at his own neck and swallowed. The little nub in the centre bobbed. He then pointed at Lanrith. Once her brother had hesitantly shifted his scarf aside, she had been able to see past the ropes of thick scarring that he didn't have one. Some of the scars were from the collar he'd worn for a long time, but the bulk of them were there because the box that would hold his voice had physically been taken out. Though Granny's words now made sense, it wasn't good enough. Dr. Gascaris was attempting to explain to the girl that magic, even for witches, had rules, the simplest being that all spells needed something to be cast on. Arinka interrupted him to openly admit that she had been disappointed in the outcome of her brother's deal. Lady Nimue had curtly attempted to hush her, but the girl did not heed her warning.
I don't see why I shouldn't be upset.
The mouse huffed angrily, folding her arms indignantly over her chest.
I wanted to hear him speak, and now some witch tells me she can't do it. Everyone knows that witches can do any magic you can imagine. I think she stiffed us, old cow.
She cursed under her breath, clicking her tongue unhappily. You shouldn't speak ill of witches with them so nearby. The bride-to-be scolded the girl, and promptly slapped the back of the mouse's head with the flat of her hand. Arinka barely had time to be offended before the woman grabbed her arm and dragged her off. Lanrith's eyes went wide at how uncharacteristically physical the woman was being with his sister, but he hesitated when the doctor called back to him for help with the multitude of parcels he'd been carrying. I know where they are going. The bearded man sighed deeply, handing over the majority of his hoard to his panicked friend. It isn't pretty, but taught-headed little girls sometimes need to be taught in unconventional ways, no? He offered Lanrith a cheeky smile and a wink, before leading him off, following the pair. Soon enough, they found themselves back in front of the shoemaker's. The door was open, as though they were expected, but the sign on the glass front declared it closed. We found her this morning, Dr. Gascaris muttered somberly, though tried to keep his tone light. We came looking for you, to let you know the priests can only see the lady tomorrow morning. He pointed inside. Imagine our surprise when we found that instead. What's your step? He waved Lanrith through the door and closed it behind him when they'd both stepped past the threshold. Elena's body was in a horrific state. She had been ripped entirely in two. Her left side had been hung on the coat stand next to the door through her empty eye sockets. Her store was covered in runes written in blood. Her intestines half-stitched into a bow beneath the sewing machine, lungs nailed to a display frame, stomach split open and stretched over the welcome mat. The dull thud of paper and card hit the floor when Lanrith's arms went lax in shock. It smelled just as bad. Thick iron and fecal matter, and something acridly sweet clawed at the air in the small space. He recognized the odor as bile when it threatened up his own throat. The rest of her is upstairs, Dr. Gascaris offered softly. I wouldn't if I were you. Lanrith's eyes floated up to the ceiling, and indeed, a large patch of deep crimson had wetly soaked through the wood to leave a stain. He could hear movement up there. Arinka was whimpering. and the lady's harsh words were demanding she look and remember so the lesson will be learned. Lunrith nodded and bent down to gather up the parcels again. He would wait. By the time the woman came back down, Irinka looked traumatized. She ran to her brother and hugged him tightly, causing the parcels to fall again. She sobbed apologies into his chest, and he petted her hair in an attempt to soothe her agony. It was a hard lesson, though it was probably for the best. It would not do to have her meet the same fate for running her mouth. The doctor admitted that they had been the ones to close the shop, in case Lunrith and Irinka had wanted to claim anything before the guards were notified. Considering this might have been their fates, if Granny had presumed them to have interfered in one of her deals. Irinka's knees completely gave out at the realization.
Len, she knew she was putting us in such danger.
Some people are selfish, Mouse. Lady Nimue sighed, turning towards the stock not covered in blood, and inspecting a pair of green-embroidered dancing slippers. Now, let's find you a fresh pair of boots. Then we can report this to the authorities. Lepori Day didn't seem surprised by the outcome of Elena's deal. Apparently, she wasn't the most likable woman. Apparently, they were very surprised, however, that retribution had come so quickly. With the sisters away, it was a mystery as to who could have done it. And what of the youngling? Apparently, Elena had not told a soul that she had sent her baby away with strangers, and a manhunt was quickly raised to find the child. By early evening, when they had sat down in the inn for dinner, the missing babe was all anyone could talk about. Neither of the Reed siblings could bring themselves to admit that they were the ones who had walked the newborn into the woods. The locals were beyond worried. They would suffer the wrath of a woman they described as a 5-armed, white-haired hunchback. Certainly not the entity the siblings had dealt with that morning. They exchanged worried glances and, before bed, agreed it would be best to get out of Monkakoos as soon as they could the following day.